The evening lights in the theater glowed warm against the deep red curtains, casting a golden hue across the stage. It was a live panel event, one of those moments where the cameras rolled non-stop and the audience hung on every word. 3 chairs were placed in the center under the soft spotlight. Ana de Armas sat in the middle, Sandra Bullock to her right, and Keanu Reeves to her left. The crowd buzzed with excitement. But beneath it was that unpredictable energy that came with live events. You never knew what someone might say. The conversation had been light at first. They shared funny stories from sets, moments of friendship, and little inside jokes that made the audience laugh. Keanu, as always, spoke less than the others, but when he did, his words landed gently and with weight. Ana's smile lit up the stage every time she spoke, her voice warm and genuine. Sandra, confident and quick-witted, carried her own kind. Of grace, the kind that could both protect and command a room. Then it happened. A man in the audience, holding the mic passed to him by an usher, stood up. His question came out coated with that uncomfortable tone that makes people shift in their seats. "Ana," he said with a smirk, "do you think you're only getting roles because of your looks? I mean, be honest, if you weren't beautiful, would anyone even take you seriously?" The room went still. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, the operators unsure whether to zoom in or pull back. Ana froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the sting to register. Her hands rested on her lap, but her knuckles tightened. Keanu's single quote's eyes shifted immediately toward her, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. He didn't speak, not yet. He leaned back in his chair, but his attention sharpened like glass catching the light. Sandra moved before anyone else could. Her voice was calm, but it carried an unmistakable strength. "You know," she began, leaning forward slightly, "it's funny how people still try to reduce women to their appearance. Even when they've proven their talent over and over again." Ana's been nominated for awards for her performances, worked in multiple languages, and shown a depth that most actors dream of. If you can't see past her beauty, that says more about you than about her. There was a ripple in the audience. Some clapped immediately. Others stayed silent, processing what had just been said. Ana exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just a little. "Thank you," she said softly to Sandra, her voice almost lost. In the hush, Keanu single quotes his gaze stayed on Ana for another moment before he looked toward the man in the audience. His silence was not empty. It was heavy, the kind that draws attention without demanding it. His expression didn't show anger or even disdain, showed something more cutting, disappointment. Sandra wasn't finished. "And just so we're clear," she continued, turning back to the man, "talent isn't measured by whether someone fits your personal definition of worth. It's measured by the way they make audiences feel. And Ana's work speaks for itself." The man shifted uncomfortably, muttering something under his breath before sitting down. The moderator tried to steer the conversation back, but the energy in the room had shifted. The moment was already trending online, with clips of Sandra's, word spreading fast. People were calling it the perfect defense, and the moment everyone fell in love with Sandra Bullock all over again. But for Keanu, sitting quietly beside them, this wasn't just about one rude question. He had seen this before, the way people tried to strip someone of their dignity in front of a crowd. He knew the look in Ana's eyes in that split second. Before Sandra spoke, it was the same look he had seen in people who had been underestimated, belittled, or dismissed. After the event ended, backstage, Keanu walked beside Ana and Sandra. Ana was quiet, her smile returning but not quite reaching. Her eyes. Sandra gave her a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder before heading to speak with a crew member. "You handled that with a lot of grace." Keanu said quietly to Ana, "I didn't do much." She replied with a small shrug. "You didn't have to," Keanu said, his voice steady. "Sometimes the way you hold yourself after someone tries to hurt you, that's the loudest answer." Of all, Ana gave a small smile then, and for a moment the tension lifted. But what none of them knew was that this public moment was just the start. Within days, the incident would take on a life of its own, and a wave of unexpected events would bring all 3 of them into a situation far bigger than a single question. a situation that would test their friendships, their resilience, and their belief in standing up for what's right. Asterisk, the clip from the panel spread across social media like wildfire. Within hours, it was on news sites, entertainment blogs, and personal feeds worldwide. Some people praised Sandra's defense of Anna, calling it a masterclass in handling public disrespect. Others focused on Keanu's quiet, piercing stare toward the man who had asked the question, saying it was the silence that said everything. But as with anything on the internet, not everyone saw it with kindness. A few voices twisted the moment into something it wasn't, accusing Anna of playing the victim or claiming Sandra overreacted. Noise was loud enough that, by the next day, Anna's phone was full of notifications, both love and hate flooding her inbox. She didn't talk much about it at first, not even with Keanu or Sandra. She went through her scheduled interviews, smiling politely, but when she thought no one was looking, the weight of it showed in the way her shoulders slumped just a little more each day. Keanu noticed. He always noticed the small things. On the third day after the panel, he sent her a simple message. Coffee, no cameras, just us. They met in a quiet cafe tucked into a side street, the kind of place with worn wooden tables and the smell of fresh bread lingering in the air. Anna walked in wearing a baseball cap pulled low, her eyes hidden behind dark glasses. You don't have to hide, Keanu said softly as she sat down. It's easier, she replied, her voice tired. People think I should just brush it off, but it stays with you. I've worked so hard, and one question makes it feel like none of that matters. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his hands wrapped loosely around his coffee cup. It does matter. The work matters. The truth matters. It's the people who want to tear you down. They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about what makes them feel bigger. And the only way they can feel bigger is by trying to make someone else feel smaller. Anna looked at him for a long moment, then let out a small breath. That was almost a laugh. You always make things sound simple? Simple doesn't mean easy, he said with a faint smile. The conversation might have ended there. But as they were leaving the cafe, a young woman approached. She was in her mid-20s, with a nervous smile and a notebook clutched in her hand. I'm sorry to bother you, she said, glancing between them, but I just wanted to thank you, Anna. I saw the video. I've dealt with people questioning me, my whole life, my worth, my abilities, even my place in the room. Seeing you hold your head high, it helped me. Anna's eyes softened. She thanked the woman quietly, but as they walked away, Keanu noticed something in her posture, a small lift, like someone had taken a bit of the weight off her shoulders. Later that night, Sandra called. Hey, just checking in, she said. You doing okay? I'm better, Anna replied. Thanks to you. Maybe a little too Keanu. Keanu, sitting nearby, could hear Sandra's laugh through the phone. That's how it works, Sandra said. We hold each other up. What none of them knew was that the man from the panel had not disappeared quietly. He had given an interview of his own, claiming he had been misunderstood and trying to paint himself as the victim. His words would spark another round of attention, one that would pull the three friends into a more public confrontation than they ever intended, forcing them to decide how far they were willing to go to stand their ground. 2 days later, the interview appeared online. It wasn't on a major network, just a mid-sized entertainment channel. But the clip spread fast. The man from the panel sat there with an air of false humility, saying, I never meant to offend. People are too sensitive these days. I was just asking a question that's on everyone's mind. The host nodded along, letting him talk without challenge. Worse, he hinted that Sandra had overstepped, and that Keanu had sat there silently because he knew I was right. By that evening, headlines twisted the narrative panel incident overblown. Audience member speaks out. Comments. Section filled with debates. Some defended Anna and Sandra, but others used the man's words to fuel fresh insults. Keanu saw the video late that night while sitting in his kitchen. The dim light from the overhead lamp cast shadows across his face as he listened. There was no anger in his expression, just that deep, quiet disappointment that always seemed heavier than rage. The next morning, he called Sandra and Anna to meet at his place. When they arrived, Anna still wore her cap and glasses. Sandra carried 2 bags of pastries, and Keanu already had coffee brewing. We can't just let him spin this, Sandra said, setting the pastries on the table. He's trying to make it look like we attacked him. If we go after him directly, we give him more attention, Keanu said calmly. But if we show the truth without feeding his version, people will see it for what it is. Anna listened. Quietly, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. So what do we do? Keanu leaned forward slightly. We tell the bigger story. Not about him, but about what moments like that mean, about respect, dignity, and why it matters to stand up for each other. If we take control of the conversation, his words won't matter. Sandra nodded slowly. We do it together? Together. Keanu said they decided to record a joint conversation, nothing staged. It's just the three of them sitting in Keanu's living room, talking honestly about what happened, how it felt, and why they responded the way they did. They spoke about moments in their own careers when they'd been underestimated or dismissed. The people who had stepped in for them, and the times they'd had to step in for others. Anna's voice shook slightly when she said, I've been in rooms where people decided who I was before I even opened my mouth. This wasn't the first time. But it was the first time I had friends who didn't let me stand there alone. Keanu didn't speak much, but when he did, it was with the kind of quiet that makes people lean in. Respect is a choice we make every day, and kindness. Kindness is never wasted. Even if it doesn't change the person you're standing up to, it changes the person you're standing up for.
Ow.
They posted the video on all their social platforms at the same time. Within hours, it was everywhere. The focus shifted instead. Of rehashing the man's words, people were sharing quotes from their conversation, praising the way they had turned the moment into something bigger. But not everyone was pleased. By the next day, Keanu's assistant forwarded him a message from an unknown email address. It was short and unsettling. You should have stayed out of it. You don't know who you're dealing with. Keanu read it twice, then closed his laptop without a word. He didn't mention it to Anna or Sandra. Not yet. But deep down, he had a feeling this was no longer just about words or public opinion. Someone was pushing back. They might not stop at online threats. Asterisk, the email stayed in Keanu's mind like a shadow that followed him everywhere. He had received his share of odd messages before, part of life in the public eye. But this one felt different. It wasn't random, and it wasn't just a fan crossing a line. There was intent in the words, a quiet warning with an edge sharp enough to cut. 2 days later, while Keanu was walking back from a late meeting, he noticed a black sedan parked across from his building. Its headlights were off, and the windows were tinted so dark that they reflected only the faint glow of the street lamps. He kept walking, calm on the outside, but his senses sharpened. The next morning, Sandra called. You're going to think. I'm paranoid, she began, but I swear someone was following me after I left the gym last night. Keanu didn't think she was paranoid. You're not imagining it, he said quietly. I've seen it too. They met later that afternoon at a quiet restaurant with a back entrance. Anna was already there, a scarf pulled loosely around her neck. She looked uneasy. I've been getting messages, she said. Anonymous accounts, all saying the same thing, that we should stop talking about the panel incident? Sandra leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. So someone's trying to shut us up. But why we didn't even name him in the video? Maybe it's not just him, Keanu said. Maybe it's someone who doesn't like what the conversation turned into. Their joint video had sparked a larger discussion online about respect, gender bias, and public shaming. Countless people, not just actors, had shared their own experiences. The momentum was growing into something more than a celebrity moment. Keanu looked at them both. We need to decide if we're willing to see this through, because if we keep going, they might push harder. Anna's voice was steady, though her hands were clasped tightly together. If we stop now, we prove them right that we can be scared into silence. Sandra nodded. Then we don't stop. Over the next week, the three of them began working with a small advocacy group that focused on protecting individuals from public harassment and online abuse. They agreed to speak at a private fundraising event. No press, no cameras. It's just supporters and members of the group. But on the night of the event, as Keanu arrived at the small venue, he noticed something immediately wrong. One of the security guards at the entrance was arguing with a man who had no invitation but insisted on getting inside. Keanu recognized him instantly, the same man from the panel. His face was harder now, his smile tight. "Just wanted to say hello," he said when he spotted Keanu. "You've made your point," Keanu replied evenly. "Go home." The man leaned in slightly. "I told you before, you don't know who you're dealing with." Security escorted him away, but the tension didn't leave. Inside the event, Keanu scanned the room, keeping a quiet watch while Anna and Sandra spoke with attendees. Didn't say anything about the encounter until the speeches were over. "He was here tonight," Keanu told them in the corner of the room. "He's not letting this go." Anna's face went pale. "Does he want from us?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the door. "Whatever it is, we're not going to let him decide how this ends." And none of them knew that within days, the situation would escalate beyond uncomfortable encounters and veiled threats. Something was coming that would force them to step into the open, to defend themselves and their message in front of far more people than they had ever planned. The confrontation came faster than any of them expected. 3 days after the event, Sandra, Anna, and Keanu were invited to appear on a popular late-night talk show. It was supposed to be lighthearted, a mix of fun questions, movie promotions, and maybe a few laughs to ease the tension of the last weeks. The producers promised there would be no mention of the panel incident. No surprises. But live television had a way of bending promises. The first part of the interview went smoothly. They told stories from film sets, joked about past roles, and shared an easy chemistry that made the audience laugh. Keanu's quiet humor, Sandra's quick wit, and Anna's warmth filled the stage with a comfortable energy. Then the host leaned forward, his tone shifting slightly. "So, you three have been in the headlines a lot lately," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "All because of that one audience question at the panel. And tonight we thought we'd clear the air a bit." Keanu felt the change immediately, the subtle tightening in the audience's focus. The sound of a new tension settling in. "Clear the air," Sandra repeated, raising an eyebrow. The host gestured toward the side of the stage. "We've invited someone to join us, the man from that panel, so he can share his side of the story." There was a collective murmur from the audience. Anna stiffened, Sandra's jaw clenched, and Keanu simply sat very still, his eyes fixed on the curtain. As the man walked out, he took a seat at the end of the couch, looking too pleased with himself. "Thanks for having me," he said, glancing first at the host, then at the crowd. The host began with a few softball questions, letting the man explain that he never meant any harm, that he had been misinterpreted. But then he looked at Keanu. "You didn't say anything that night," the host said. "Why not?" Keanu turned his gaze toward the man, then back to the host. His voice was calm but carried through the room. "Because sometimes silence is the best way to show someone their words aren't worth engaging with. But since you're asking, I stayed quiet that night because Sandra had already said the truth. And when the truth is spoken clearly, you don't need to add noise to it." The audience clapped lightly, but the man leaned forward, a smirk on his face. "Sounds like you were hiding behind her." Before Keanu could reply, Anna spoke, her voice steady but edged with emotion. "No, he wasn't hiding. He was choosing not to give you more than you deserved, and you're proving right now why he made that choice." The man tried to interrupt, but Sandra cut in. "You came here thinking you could twist this again, but you've just shown everyone who you really are. We're done letting you set the tone for this conversation." The audience erupted into applause, and for a moment the man's smirk faltered. The host, sensing the shift, tried to wrap up the segment, but the damage was done. The clip of the exchange would spread online within hours, this time with the full weight of the truth on display. Backstage after the show, Anna let out a long breath. "I didn't know he'd be here. I don't like surprises like that." "Neither," Sandra said, "but at least now it's out there. All of it." Keanu nodded slowly. "He wanted to put us on the defensive. Instead, we stood together. That's what matters." They didn't know it yet, but the public reaction to the confrontation would do more than just end the man's attempts to twist the story. It would open a door to something unexpected, an opportunity to turn their moment into a platform that could help far more people than they had imagined. Asterisk, the morning after the late-night show. The clip was everywhere. It wasn't just trending in entertainment. It had spread into news, culture, and even academic discussions. The image of Sandra leaning forward, Anna speaking with calm conviction, and Keanu's steady, unshaken gaze became the face of the story. Messages poured in from people around the world. Actors, journalists, teachers, students, and everyday strangers wrote about how they had experienced similar moments when they had been questioned, reduced, or dismissed in public. And almost every message ended with the same line: "Thank you for showing what it looks like to stand together by the end of the week." A well-known global conference on media and respect invited them to be keynote speakers. The organizers made it clear they didn't just want a retelling of the panel incident, they wanted a real conversation about public respect, handling hostility, and using influence for change. Keanu, Anna, and Sandra agreed, but only if it could be done in a way that gave space to others, not just them. On the day of the conference, the hall was packed. People from dozens of countries filled the seats, cameras lined the back wall, and the air carried that quiet, expectant tension that happens when an audience knows they're about to hear something real. Sandra opened first, her voice steady and confident. "We're not here to talk about one rude question. We're here to talk about how we answer moments like that, not with more cruelty, but with clarity. How we choose to stand by each other when it counts." Anna followed, her voice softer, but every bit as strong. "The truth is, you don't always get to control the moment. Sometimes the words come at you fast, in front of everyone. And all you have is the choice to hold your head high, or let someone else define you." Then Keanu spoke. His voice was quiet at first, but the room leaned in. "When you see someone being diminished, you have a choice too. You can stay silent, you can laugh along, or you can make it clear you're not letting it pass. You may not change the person saying the words, but you will change the person they were said to. And that can mean everything." As he spoke, the hall was silent, except for the faint click of cameras. The weight of the words hung in the air. Long after he finished, at the end of their talk, they invited others on stage, people from the audience who had faced similar moments in their own fields. Stories were shared, voices were heard, and the conversation became something bigger than any of the three had expected. When they finally stepped off stage, the applause followed them all the way to the side exit. Anna looked at Sandra and Keanu, a smile touching her face. "We came here because of one moment," she said, "but we're leaving with something much bigger." Keanu glanced back at the hall, then at his friends. "Because when you stand together," he said, "you're stronger than whatever tries to divide you." And in that moment, they knew the storm that had started with a cruel question had been turned into something unshakable, a reminder to everyone watching that kindness and courage, when shared, could outlast anything.